IMHO Talk Show. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. IMHO Talk Show.
We're back.
You know who it is, Sir Charles.
It's Max.
Razor.
That's right. And, as we stated, as we always edutain, but we kicked off this show in particular, and we may even alluded to it last show, Miss Max, about just being prepared and ready, right? And that comes down to survival. That comes down to, us being able to be independent, being able to take care of ourselves and each other. And, whether you're looking at the pillars of such as like Black Panthers or whatever movement it may be that was about group economics, power economics, about self-sustainability, there's three common needs, right? Your food, clothing, and shelter. All right. And so the guest that we've had and we want to continue to have is to drive that point home. And so delighted right now to have none other than Mr. Michael Carter with us. Brother, it's very, very inspirational story. I have had the pleasure of meeting him, crossing paths with him. Brother Carter, how you feeling this afternoon, man?
Feeling outstanding. How about yourself?
Good, man.
Welcome to the show. He introduced you like you couldn't folk.
Yeah.
Maybe you are. I don't know.
Technically. Hey, look, if you search down the line far enough, we're gonna cross paths.
We got some Lewis's in
there. Yeah. Yes, indeed, man. So Carter Family Farms, like kind of for the folks who never heard of it, give us sort of that origin story. Let the folks know about the family and sort of the history of Carter Farms.
All right. Well, thank you much for having me today.
Thank you.
I guess the family farm goes back to before the family farm. And then roughly 1859, 1860. My sixth great grandfather, his name was Robert Ellis, started one of the first free Black communities in Orange County called Freetown, which is where the chef Anna Lewis ultimately came from and came out of.
That's right.
And I think Robert Ellis's vision spread or was planted in all the other members of the family. And like many Black families, I'm like related to my families on both sides.
Right.
In many cases,
Yep.
Double cousins and double entendres and all that in the family. And my family, that particular side of my family, my great-great-grandparents, Jefferson Davis Shirley and Catherine Walker Shirley, purchased their property November 5th, 1910, for $722.05. And that's the farm that we stay on to this day.
How much property was that?
That's 150 acres.
Okay.
And I think he had about 10 children. But in those times, the average wage was about $12 a month. So we'd be able to save up to $700 off of $12 a month. Yeah, it was major. And he didn't buy property there. I found deeds from other family members in which he had property on 522 and some other places that he sold to other family members. Because during that time period, it was pretty much illegal to sell Black folks property. White folks had to give it to you. And if white folks didn't give it to you, then if there was some Black owners, they could then provide it for you. So they saw the value of family or of land. Soon after that, in 1919, my great grandfather purchased another plot of land about 5 miles from my farm, another 25 acres for about $255. And that's been in our family. Both of those properties have been in our family ever since. So they're both century farm or century plots. And my great grandmother, in her infinite wisdom, rescued the farm after the Great Depression. My cousins, uncles, aunts, whoever, they did something and let the property almost be let go, foreclosed upon. And my great grandmother, from what stories I've heard from various uncles and that, so they said she wanted to make sure her sons had a place to come home to after the war.
Yeah.
And she made it her mission. So while my grandfather and his brothers were in World War II, they would send back their pay of $29 a month every month to my grandmother to help pay off the debt they incurred from this wedding or something that was financed by the land, and then wasn't after that. So after 1947, my grandmother comes in and has all the money to be able to take care of the property, and the rest, as they say, is history.
Right.
We've been on that land ever since, and working to expand. We're looking to acquire the land next to us, which is about another 120 acres that a gentleman named Dr. Charles West owned. Dr. Charles West was the first Black quarterback to play in the Rose Bowl.
Y'all own all of Orange County, don't you?
And if I did, y'all be on my radio station. No, we're just trying to get our little piece of the pie, you know. And I think for many Black families, we've had histories of owning land, but because we didn't always value the land, we sold it, we gave it away. And now I'm just trying to re-inspire us to go back and buy the land. You know, forget buying the bar. Let's buy the block. Let's buy the land. Let's buy the farms.
There you go.
Let's buy our farms. And to me, that's how generational wealth starts. First with generational health. You know, when you're working off the land, you're generally a lot healthier. And then your vision is clear. Be able to make wiser decisions and be able to grow your legacy without having to deal with the crux of really debilitating financial or health bills related to shocks. And, you know, this person died here, we weren't able to do this. And instead of doing a GoFundMe, you can actually pull equity out of the land to take care of your realities.
Yeah. Hey, so let's take it right there. Ladies and gentlemen, we are joined by Michael Carter Jr. Correct? Junior.
I'm a junior.
Yep, Michael Carter Jr. of Carter Family Farms. And let's start right there. Like, what encouraged that decision-making process? Like, was that something that was just instilled in you as far as family value, or was this like something that you kind of grew to learn? Like when it came to that decision-making of, it is important for us to be able to maintain a farm or multiple farms, all this acreage. And also, not that, man, I can sell this, make some good money, go buy me a house in the city and be done. Like, so take us through that, like the importance of that decision-making for you.
I would like to say that, I was wise and you know, intelligent, but I was young and dumb and ready to get to the city. So I ran away from the farm, probably numerous times. And I didn't grow up there. I grew up in Caroline County, which is about 2 counties over from Orange. But as soon as I got the opportunity, I went to D.C. I worked in D.C. I was going to make my life in D.C. And probably for the first 12, 13 years of my life after college, and even before college, and working as an intern in DC, I was DC. I was a go-go head. I was go-go Mike. I wasn't Farmer Mike. And I was. It wasn't until I went overseas. I lived overseas in Ghana for about 5 years, from 2012 to 2017. And in that period, I saw how land was so important to them. And I could remember the stories my father would tell me about land ownership, and just kind of reiterating in me driving to school, you know, this is what happens when Black folks get land. They sell it. Don't sell yours. And he kind of drilled that in me over and over again, either, you know, innately kind of, you know, like, why are you telling me this? I'm not going to ever be in that situation. And then when I was in Ghana, and we have numerous plots of land from different parts of the family in Orange. And when I was in Ghana, there was an episode, I think in 2013, where a portion of our land, which I had a great connection to, was sold. And it was sold pretty much nobody in the family really knew except for the elders who decided to sell it. Like, hi, you going to sell Grandma Lizzie's house? And, you know, Grandma Lizzie's house was like the cornerstone of the family, where this is where everybody came and got introduced to the family. You know, you bring in a little girlfriend, boyfriend down there, you bring it to Grandma Lizzie's house to be examined, and we can talk about him or her, and, you know,
decide whether or not we like him or her.
There you go.
Right.
There you go. And, you know, if you got pregnant and, you know, without the father, there'd be that metal rocking chair on the porch you sit there and talk to the elders with, and they kind of coax you through that and help you through it. So it was always, that's how I got introduced to my family. Sitting on the porch, my mother holding me, and she having to go through the interview process with my great grandmother and them to make sure she passed the smell test. So when they sold that house, I was a bit bothered, a little bit in Ghana, and I was going through some things in Ghana with my own land ownership there, and seeing some of the realities of owning land there. I had a 50-year lease, and I was building a home there, and one of the masons was telling one of my other masons that, you know, in 40 years, this will be ours. I'm like, it just didn't add up well to me. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to build something here, and then you just kind of plot on me and, you know, wait out, and then as soon as it's time to renew the lease, you say, nah, I'm not interested. I'll take your house and all of that. And I wanted to have that legacy. So when I returned back here in 2017, as I say, the land kind of spoke to me. It was like, you got to tell this story. I misinterpreted it. I thought it was going to tell the story of my experiences in West Africa, and that's kind of what I was thinking. But, you know, ideally became the story of my ancestors and them holding that land. And I discovered more history around that land that helped me to better understand the importance of it, the value of it. So it was definitely a slow, methodical breakthrough of the importance of it, and kind of seeing the state of African Americans, the state of African American farmers, and our realities in Virginia, like You know, we're an endangered species.
Yeah.
And the way you created the endangered species, you destroy the environment of that species in most cases. And there's not many black farmland, so it's not that many black farmers. And we've slowly destroyed them. And you can blame a lot of things, but I blame the community. Because you can blame the government for not providing programs and stuff like that, but the community was what sustained us.
I've seen some signs that said black farmers for Trump.
And it may be, you know, so I'm not going to deny it. There's a whole bunch of signs for farmers for Trump. And, you know, in the first administration, he dished out about 28 to $40 billion of funds to farmers. So if I'd have got some of them, if I'd have got more of that money, I'd probably had a sign in my yard too. You know, I didn't get as much, so I couldn't afford a sign.
Gotcha. We are joined by Michael Carter, Carter Farms, talking about the importance of agriculture. Really, we're talking about family lineage and you know the value thereof. That being said, Michael, so I noticed that you have a term that I don't think that I was cognizant of until Carter Farms, which is Africulture. What is the difference between Africulture and agriculture?
Well, Africulture is a term that we coined, ultimately a business that I started, a nonprofit that we have, which talks about the principles, practices, plants, and people of African descent that contributed to agriculture. And that came out of the perception that Black people have of themselves in agriculture. When you think about agriculture, you think immediately about slavery, or agriculture and Black people, you think immediately about slavery. You know, I can remember my grandmother telling me, get my cotton picking hands off of that, whatever. But that cotton picking wasn't something that was a term of endearment. That was really a term of, you know, you picking cotton and the little nasty, scrawny hands of yours, ashy hands need to get off whatever they're on. And subconsciously, we have a lot of that where we, you know, I've seen memes on Facebook talking about, you know, somebody eating cotton candy with a fork. Like, I ain't picking nobody's cotton, not even cotton candy. And that's the perception that we have related to agriculture a lot of times, not that agriculture was a form of liberation. So we go through pretty much the impact that the principles, the practices, the plants, the people, and now the policies have related to our liberation or our failure within the American society and society at whole. So when we talk about like cotton was an African plant. You know, we don't really talk about that, or rice or okra or the cola nut that ultimately created Coca-Cola. You know, or the cotton with the indigo that creates the denim jeans that now everybody wears. These are the fabric of our lives, but the fabric of those things came out of Africa. And many of us have no idea that that's part of our lineage, that it wasn't just the enslaved that did it, but also the crops of our homeland.
A quick question for you. So when it comes to things like Hound the Hog, right? The documentary series on Netflix. When I looked at it, it was for information purposes, but it sounds like when you look at things like that, you find the connectivity of our people to re-educate us to get back to where we once came from. Is that accurate?
That's accurate. I'm probably in the mold of fashion of Dr. Jessica Harris, who wrote Hound the Hog. Well, I look for the connections. I truly don't watch those documentaries. I don't want to be tainted by other people's connections. But at the same time, I think I have seen that, and I have spoken to Dr. Harris a few times. There's a connection there to me for our soul. Our literal health is connected to the land. As African people, we are naturally connected to the soil.
That's right.
We can't help it, you know, and even when you try to get away from it, I was in Washington, D.C. and Southeast, Minnesota Avenue, and I found myself in the back of my house planting herbs, walking outside barefoot, planting pansies. I'm like, what am I doing here? I'm not that guy, but I am that guy because I can't help but be connected, you know, and our history has always been that related in that way, that our strength and our cultural strength and our civilization strength is always related to agriculture. If you go back to Kemet or Egypt, you know, we learned about the Nile Valley civilization, and it's built upon agriculture. The reason why enslaved Africans were taken from the place it was taken because of their agricultural prowess. They were skilled master farmers. And to me, that's going to always be our strength, no matter what we run away from. You know, when we were here and newly free, you know, the great Dr. Booker T. Washington, he said, this is your strength. Build nations or communities around agriculture. And that's what we did. And that's where you had the Black Wall Streets. The Black Wall Streets didn't just come out of, you know, insurance. It came out of being able to feed yourselves first. And then after you were getting all those things in place, insurance and other companies came up that you can now insure and better build more financial liquidity in your family. But there's this idea that this isn't who we are. I don't want to be no farmer. In DC, you say you call individuals Bamas. Bamas being somebody from Alabama or from South who dress fun and usually dress like the seasons, where they dress because they dress loudly, had a lot of colors because the environment was reflective of flowers and trees, and they dressed accordingly. In DC, you dress dreary because all you see around you is black, gray, white, blue, navy blue, that's not deep. Even royal blue. And it was those connections that kind of I see and try to make. Being a go-go scholar of sorts, there was a song, I think most of us remember, Sardines and Pork and Beans.
Absolutely.
Right. And that was a great song, but it was a cultural song around food and around food policy, around Reagan, and then there's another song called The Word. The Word, if you ever listen to it, he's talking about the Farm Bill of 1985 and how, because of shifts in that Farm Bill, it affected Farmer Brown being able to sell his crop. Springtime mud. I can't remember how it goes exactly. We're talking about Farmer Brown got to sell his mud because it's been the floods. And these are individuals who were connected through the pots and the pans, but also through the culture of agriculture unknowingly. This is people from Southeast Berry Farms who lived in a place called Berry Farms, which was named after a farm in Southeast DC prior to. So all these connections, I definitely try to make. And I think, Dr. Harris and others like myself, Dr. Lenny Sorensen, a lot of us to kind of make these connections because we get blindsided by life and we forget that this is how we sustain ourselves. This is our strength and has historically always been our strength. And when we lean into it, we're stronger. When we lean away from it, we're much weaker.
Loving it. Or talking to Michael Carter Farms. In the building with I Am H.O. Talk Show. Man, this is real good stuff. Michael, share the importance of this, like, to people in general, like when it comes to just owning like our health through what we consume and whatnot, right? Because there's and I'm curious if you have any opinions on things like urban farm. I heard you mention when you were in DC, but even now today, when people say, "Oh man, but I live in an apartment building, whatever the case may be, or I don't have a lot of land," and people think about different types of urban farming and things like that. But but whether it's like a micro scale of farming or whether it's going to farmers markets, things like that. Just talk to us about the importance of Black people today. And again, who may not live in a rural area, but like things they can do, and the importance of like fresh foods and us taking ownership of that.
It's a great importance. And I can't stress it. I've been a vegan for about 20 years, 25, 21 years. And, I've gotten into the mode of convenience. And convenience is the biggest killer of us. Because when you're eating processed foods, you're not eating it because it tastes good. It's eating because it's convenient. And if you've eaten it so much, it becomes palatable and good tasting, but it's not good for you. And we sacrifice what's good for us for what's most convenient for us. And there's a need, and I appreciate the urban farming movement because you have to start somewhere. Some people say, "Well, these aren't farms." Well, it doesn't matter if it's a farm, it's a garden. It's giving people the opportunity to get back to the soil and the land. And to restore connections that may have been lost. Usually you get elders out there who explain what they did back in Mississippi or Georgia or South Carolina, teaching other folks, or people from Latin descent, people from African descent, who were born in Africa or the Caribbean, talking about what they did in their home places related to food. Food is a weapon. And it's one of those weapons that it can be used against you or for you. And too many times we've allowed it to be used against us.
One other thing, this is great stuff. First off, and I'm proud because I'm from Orange County, and that's where your farm is from. With the conversation we had earlier. Now, what I want to get to is what I'm kind of hearing you sort of lead towards is coming off the grid as well. When it comes, I want to ask you about that, about coming off the grid. So if you're trying to give people the opportunity to get back to vegetables and things that don't have labels, that's real food. I tell everybody all the time, if it has a label, it's not food. So when it comes to being self-sufficient with the land, with your food, with independence, with cattle, whatever, how do you do that? Be educated, such as yourself, go to college, and still maintain your autonomy for who you are as a Black person when it comes to the land.
So with that particular thing, especially self-sufficiency and trying to be off grid, I say go very slowly. That's a major step. And what you don't want to do is run before you can crawl. So if you don't have a good understanding of how to eat and how to eat fresh foods, there's no need to try to get off grid. You're going to fall flat on your face. I walked down that path. I tried to do some off grid stuff in West Africa. Needless to say, I'm back here. You know what I'm saying? It ain't go too hot. It takes a lot to go off grid, and you have to prepare yourself, and you have to prepare your mind with some of the realities and not having conveniences, because that again goes back to conveniences. The electricity, the toilet flushing, refrigeration, all those things are conveniences we take for granted. Let your toilet not flush. You call somebody.
Right.
You're dealing with that immediately. That's an issue that we got to deal with. You know what I'm saying? So it's one of those things where, you know, if you go too hard, too fast, you're not going to be as successful. I'd always say, you know, start with your food, you know, preparing 2 to 3, 4, 5 meals per week at home. You know, getting in the habit of preparing meals at home as opposed to getting Uber Eats and takeout and restaurants and all that kind of stuff. Get used to growing. And if you're in an apartment, if you're in suburbs, you can still grow something in your home. You can grow microgreens or have a little container garden with like the salad containers that we get, put some soil in there, put some lettuce seeds in there. Start small. Starting small helps you to see the process and helps you to have smaller failures, because you're going to have failures in agriculture. And if you start big and you fail big, you're probably not going to do it again. So if you start small and you have some successes, it's going to build up that dopamine responses in your body to say, okay, this is working. So when you have the failures, it's not going to look as bad. It's not going to feel as bad as. So I always encourage, you know, start small. And that's any farmer, any gardener, anybody I talk to or work with, start small. And then from there, open your mind up to some of the other things, and then see some examples around about off grid. You know, get some ideas. Don't just watch YouTube and be inspired and you know, motivated. And next thing you know, this guy on YouTube is just selling you wolf tickets. You know, it looks really good from that 30-second video, but you ain't seen the 3 years of struggle he's had to get to that point. And that's what really it takes. And we kind of get sold on things on the internet where we think that it's true because it's edited well. And it's that those parts that ended up on the edit floor is what really makes us who we need to be in terms of persevering through that. Very few times do you see the failures come out. It's usually the successes. It looks really good, clean. You don't see the challenges. And we know how we struggle just with electricity during a snowstorm. You know, folks are running to they run into the grocery store. They're buying up all the freaking milk and eggs and toilet paper. And then, you know, when we are without electricity for 2 or 3 days, we're not in a good space. You're cold. You know what I'm saying? You're kind of struggling. Your phones may or may not be working. You may have to go to a hotel or stay with some other family members. And those are real realities. If you can't go through a day without electricity, don't be trying to do a lifestyle without it. You know, those are things that, you know, you got to definitely crawl and prepare your mind. And if you don't have that mental toughness to deal with that and the challenges that come, especially when you start dealing with children, like you can take it, but can your child go to school without a shower, you know, for 2 days because we ain't had no running water? How do you feel about that? You know, them complaining.
I have 2 questions for you. The first being, of course, we all hear just the information is put out. One day something is good for you. One day eggs is healthy for you, and the next day eggs are not healthy for you. And it's true that we've all heard the same when it talks about our fruits and vegetables and the pesticides that are put on them. So I want to give you opportunity to, you know, give us a more realistic picture of what's happening there. The other thing is another common debate of whether or not we're in climate change. Some say we're in a climate crisis. Some say we're not. But I'm interested to know how you as a farmer feel like the climate will or has or will impact your farm.
Great question. That kind of helps to also shape some of the things we do with Africulture.
Okay.
One of the things we do with the farm is I'm going to touch your last part of the question first and then go back to the pesticides and things. But we grow African crops with the idea that, based upon what I've experienced, it's getting warmer and the amount of rain and precipitation cycles are changing during the summertime when it's hotter. So it's getting, and plants aren't doing as well. So if you think about a plant like a spinach or even a lettuce, they're cool season plants, which means they're designed or were originated in Europe and the Mediterranean, where it was a lot cooler for a lot longer. And they adapted accordingly. So when you put them in heat, they do what's called bolting, which means they become bitter and they send up seeds saying that I'm done. It's too hot for me. I'm going to die here soon. So I'm going to send up seeds to send out for the next generation. When things bolt, you're usually not edible. So spinach and all that kind of stuff. So to get spinach now in the springtime, they have to be in very controlled environments. They had to be in a greenhouse or something like that, which takes it out of its natural cycle and also takes away the nutrients because they're being fed pretty much intravenously. They're being fed through hydroponics. There's nutrients going through the roots, but they're not getting all the nutrients that you generally get from the soil. And there's a difference between nutrients you get from the soil versus nutrients that you get hydroponically. It's just like being in a hospital on an IV. It can keep you alive, but you're not really getting what you need to get from your foods. And the same thing happens with hydroponics. And I understand the business side of it. I'm not a big proponent of it, but I don't shun anybody for doing it. And so we grow African crops, and these African crops are ideally designed to be grown in the heat. They grow in Africa. They generally grow without a lot of water. So without a lot of water, their roots go down deeper and they're able to pull up a lot more nutrients. So when we grow our crops, we do a lot of research around these African crops because everybody in this room is of African descent, African people. And what summer vegetables do you eat that are African?
Okra.
You eat okra?
Well, I don't eat it.
Okay,
I thought. Help us out. You tell us.
No. You don't. The only African crops you generally eat in the summertime is watermelons. Okay, and that's if you eating watermelons now because before it was a thing. And this was part of the issue with food as a weapon. They weaponized watermelon against us in the 1920s. A marketing campaign because we were making a lot of money on communities selling watermelons. And they said, we'll mock you. So it became a point that your best customers now stop being your best customers because of the marketing campaign against watermelon. And we also saw a different reality of a marketing campaign with Popeye. What did Popeye eat? Spinach. And the marketing went up tremendously with spinach because they made it appear like it made you strong and healthy. So we all wanted spinach as children because Popeye had spinach. And then a lot of us didn't want watermelon as children, which was healthier for us because of the images related to being coons and all that kind of stuff. So these are all the things that we work with on the farm to try to combat and discuss. So we're working on a concept called eating for your ethnotype and growing for your ethnotype. Whereas we want you to eat more sweet potato leaves or Nigerian spinach or amaranth or
sweet potato leaves.
Leaves.
I didn't know there was such a thing.
Yeah, so all sweet potatoes have leaves. So if once they're growing, if you put a sweet potato underneath your sink for about in a brown bag for about 3 months, you'll start to see it sprout. And those leaves are edible. Right, and they're African-based. Sweet potatoes are African-based crop that could ultimately deal with things related to urban agriculture because they grow a lot of leaves in the summertime. And they're perfectly edible. Usually farmers used to give them away. In other cultures, Asian cultures, African cultures, they eat the leaves. We just don't because we eat collards and kale and turnip and all that kind of stuff. That's what we were told that we should be eating. So that's what we do on the farm in terms of dealing with climate change, trying to grow crops that be resistant to it. I believe there's a change or a shift. I'm not, and I have my theories about why. I don't think it's a lot of stuff that we're doing as a culture and as a country that makes climate change a reality. Going to like pesticides and those type of things. First of all, a lot of people get caught up on GMOs, and I'm not going to eat this seedless grape because it's GMO. Like that's not a GMO crop. There are 5 GMO crops, which you eat all the time or have on your body all the time. You just don't realize it. The 5 GMO crops are corn, cotton, canola or Canada oil or rapeseed, sugar beets, and what's the last one? Jeez. I'll come back to the last one.
Okay.
It's all good.
But when you fill up your gas tank, you put in GMO fuel in your car because that's ethanol in it.
Ethanol, yeah.
Right. When you put on hand sanitizer, the hand sanitizer is coming from alcohol that came from GMO corn that now you put in your hands. Soybean oil or soybeans is the other one. Soybeans, you see soybean whatever in a whole bunch of different processed foods. So a lot of these foods, the GMO stuff is in all their processed stuff. All your flaming hot whatever's, your anything that comes in a box is most likely going to have some level of GMO things in it. And then there's fruits and vegetables, which you need to consume more of no matter what's happening. Grapes, oranges, apples. Eating more fruits is definitely going to make us healthier. I try to buy organic. And, there's certain crops that are always going to be organic, whether they're listed or not, that they can't grow, they can't be sprayed. Bananas are one of those. Avocados are usually one of those because they're trees, you can't spray them. So, you can do other things to them to protect them from insects, but usually they're pretty solid. Okay. Organic or not organic. Onions and things like that, you generally want to buy organic because the onion and the onion bulbs suck up whatever's around them. So when you spray with onions, whatever's in the soil, whatever they spray, is going to get sucked up by the onion. And any other tubers like potatoes and things, strawberries, etc. I try to do organic as well. And there's a whole list of vegetables, but I try to encourage individuals first to be conscious about what you're eating. Forget about the it and just focus on what you're eating. Is it a fresh vegetable? Is it real food? Or is it something that came out of a box? Is it something that was processed? If you can get past that and start eating real food, then we can start to have a conversation and you start to see the value of it because your mind is made up of your neurons that food or foods-like substances are controlling and creating more neurons. And if you're eating the stuff that's not food, you're going to have a whole lot of not food cells in your body and your thinking. And you're not going to be able to differentiate between what's food and what's not food. At a certain point, you're just going to want to satiate this desire of hunger, which is usually a lack of nutrition. So when you start to get better nutrition, you start to get less hungry.
Michael, let me interject with a question right there. And this may be something that you can touch on, and maybe you can say if you can't. But I've heard that about cancer. I've heard that the foundation of cancer is kind of like what you're saying. We're putting foreign substances in our body that's then replicating things that's foreign to our body. Is that have you ever heard that frame of thought? Is that truth in that? Or
I'm no doctor. I just play one on the radio.
Right.
I'm not a doctor, but yes, I've definitely heard that. And there's, cancer cells don't exist in certain cultures, or cancers doesn't exist in certain cultures because you get cancer cells per se, but they don't take over because what you're feeding your body is usually fighting off the cancer cells and keeping it very low. So when you're feeding things like processed foods, you can actually grow a said cancer. And there's numerous, there's a lot of people talking about a lot of stuff related to that. And I agree with a lot of it, but I look at the more practical ways of things. And this is in my humble opinion as a show. There's, when we were growing up, I think I recall my grandmother, maybe you call your grandmother, your mothers, your aunties, talking about a place where the sun doesn't shine. Now, and when I was living in Africa, there were not a lot of places that the sun didn't shine on the body. And in that, there was a lot of individuals who didn't have ailments. Breast cancer didn't exist in a lot of the villages that I went to because there would be women who found a place to be able to go topless in the areas. A lot of the areas in which we have our biggest cancers for African Americans, men and women, are usually in places that the sun don't shine. Prostate, colon, breast, ovarian, the sun needs to hit those places for the hormones that vitamin D invokes to be able to be activated. Think about how many times we're in a place during the summertime, an air-conditioned place. We're cute, so we got something on our arms. We may show off our legs.
Why you look at me when you say that?
I'm a man, so I couldn't necessarily look at him like that and
look, like not without me speaking on it. You could.
He's from Orange too. I just know way. So forgive me. You were just the cutest one in the world at the time. My bad.
That's all right.
That's how I was raised. But in those things, we have to look at again how we're getting that vitamin D on a regular basis. To make sure that we stay as healthy as possible, because you can't have both scenarios where you're eating processed foods and you're not getting the vitamin D. Like that's a double negative in terms of you want to get something eventually. And we got to be a lot more open about where we are and be okay with being outside. Sweating is like healthy. in most cases. Like you're getting out all the, folks be out there. I don't like the bugs. I'm sweating. And I gotta go back inside. Okay, you're setting yourself up for sicknesses later on. We got to get back into being back with nature and recognizing that sweating is part of life. You sweat a little extra deodorant, you're good to go.
I got a good question for you. All right, now taking what Charles and Max just now said, one of the things that, also what this conversation has been about is that the mindset. I think Max said it in the first part of the show. The mindset is something that we combat, right? So I'm going to just be 100% transparent. When you ask, what does Popeye eat? And Max says spinach. I was getting ready to say chicken. You know what I'm saying? Popeye's chicken. That's exactly what I was getting ready to say. So she saved me, and I thank you for it, Max. But nevertheless, the mindset of when I go to buy my children's lunch in the morning, the sales are on the processed foods with the crackers and the stuff, right? Anything that is pretty much what the kids are putting inside of their lunch boxes, GMO this and red dyes this and all of it is causing cancer known. Like, so California is ahead of us at banning stuff. But even banning stuff, if our mindset is set to what we know, that's what we're going to do. Charles says that all the time, right?
Absolutely.
In your humble opinion, right? How does a person redefine their thought process so that they're eating to live and not eating inconvenience as to what you spoke of?
This is something, I teach a course called Africulture at UVA. Well, I teach my course.
I was about to mention that.
And the idea is to kind of, not necessarily to retrain them, but to get them some different ways of thinking. When I speak to audiences around this subject, this is one of the things I really harp on, is what I call the value tax. We got to put a greater value in our lives and our health, that we're quick to do things for the sake, and you see it on, again, social media memes. Would you do this for $10 million? Would you smack your mother for $1 million? There's a certain level of value that we have with our mothers that no matter what the money, it shouldn't even be a thought. Funny or not, it shouldn't be a thought. And we don't put a lot of value right now on our lives and our health. And that's a lot of times, to me, related to a lot of the music. We grew up in the era of NWA and UTFO and Slick Rick, treated like a, and you start to devalue who you are as a person subconsciously. N-word this, N-word that. The N-words have no value, in this culture society. You heard Marvin Gaye talk about brother, brother, sister, sister, and we saw each other from a different perspective. We had healthier interactions. We had issues here, but not the same that we have now, where it's been glorified to the point of us not seeing the value of ourselves first and foremost. That you're quick to put a switch on something to take out our, which comes back to how we value each other. Whereas it was a time where that was not even a question. We had a disagreement. We sat down with the elders and we discussed it out, because I didn't want to have a disagreement with my brother or my sister. I didn't want to create that tension amongst us long term. So we're not putting a value, and to me, it starts with entertainment and music, really music, that because we're such a frequency home people, that they've utilized music as a weapon against us. And if you start changing the music back to something more positive, much more, you're going to see a change and a shift. And then once you start seeing a change and a shift, you start to, again, put more emphasis on what you're putting in your machine. If you see yourself as a Rolls Royce, you're not putting kerosene in a Rolls Royce.
There you go.
You're not even putting 87 in a Rolls Royce. You got a Rolls Royce, you're looking for 96, 90, don't even have it at the regular. You're going to get, pseudo jet fuel to put in it, because you realize the value of this particular. And it's the same thing we have to do with our bodies.
That's right.
Right now, we've been putting diesel and water in our engine. Not water, because water's good. But Mountain Dew and Red 40 and all that, even 40 ounces. It was a whole time. It was like, what is in a 40 ounce? Why do you, and then how do you sell up 89 cents? In a glass bottle. It's like the bottle itself. But there's a value that we lost in that process in the 80s and 90s related to what we ate. And there has to be another push related to how we see it. And there has to be something we take into ourselves before we get into dialysis. I made a commitment to myself. I'm not going to follow in the same footsteps as my family. And a lot of times what we eat is much more hereditary than the effects of what we're eating. So it's because you had the same diet as Big Mama and them, and you eating the same things, or worse, you're going to have the same ailments. Versus understanding, if you stop that and eat healthier, you're going to see a different result. I made a pledge to myself 20 some years ago to say, I'm not going to do that again. My grandfather had issues. My father had cancer. His uncles had cancer. All these individuals, and they kept saying it's running in the family. I'm like, what's running in the family is a daggone
social disease.
The whole
pig feed.
Yeah, the pig feed, the ham, the scrapple, the bacon, and the four meats for breakfast: bacon, sausage, turkey. I mean, it's like, good gosh, and then you got to chase that down with eggs and Sunny Delight.
Yeah,
you're not even. Right. Yeah. So there's this reality that for us to get to a point of doing better, we got to do better and want to do better for ourselves and our health.
Yeah,
that to me, that's the biggest thing, especially for us in our middle age ages of sorts, between 35 to 55. We've got to really make a stance and say, I want to be healthier. And then also got to make a stance for our children to say, I want them to be healthy, not convenient. Because they're going to get conveniently sick if we keep feeding them the same stuff.
Yeah, got to start.
And that's, a lot of times we talk about like when I became a vegan, everybody would tell me, your grandmother lived to be 90 something, 95. And I understood, as I thought about it more, what she ate and 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 was straight off the land that we were living on. Yeah. It was not a processed thing in sight. And that gave them the foundation to be able to eat more processed stuff in later ages, but then, and succumb at a later age. Yeah. They had a really strong nutritional foundation where they were eating all the herbs, the poke salad and the dandelion, and, making the dandelion wines and all this kind of stuff. And those things were what kept them young and vibrant, and they could eat meat once a week. Usually on Sunday dinners or something like that. But most of the time it was beans and rice and some other things, a lot of greens that kept them young and vibrant. Now we're eating, either we're overindulging in meat on a regular basis, a lot of red meats, so your children now having shrimp for dinner on a Tuesday night. It's like, that was unheard of for me growing up. Yeah. Even having hamburgers or something, it didn't happen 2 nights in a row. It was a lot of balance in those things. And now it's like we're constantly just feeding them whatever's convenient, whatever you can pick up from whatever store, and it's having an impact where you're seeing child cancer rates going up. Yeah. You're seeing children with type 1 and type 2 diabetes as children. That wasn't the case when I was growing up. And then coupled with the inactivity, they're always on the tablets, the machines, the phones, and not going outside. I mean, in my neighborhood, it was against the law not to be outside. Yeah. Right. It was like, they had to, you remember those times where you had to actually, it's 9 o'clock at night. 9 o'clock at night, you know where your children are? Yeah. Those commercials remind parents to go and get your daggone children out the street. Because he was out there having fun and working off a lot of the huggies and the hugs and the hot dogs we may have eaten. But we worked it all off and sweated it all out. We've got to get back to a point of eating healthier whole foods. And I even though I'm a vegan, I'm not necessarily opposed to you eating healthier farm raised meats, as opposed to corporate raised meats that aren't going to be as healthy for you. So there's a redefinition of value that we have to have for ourselves as people. That if you value yourself, if it's family over everything, your health should be over all of that.
Yeah. And Michael, thank you. We are pressed up against time, but but now people would add cost to that though. People would say, I can't afford to eat healthy. Like, what do you say about that?
We afford what we can.
Right.
Okay. When I talk to individuals, I ask, how much does your cell phone cost? How much does a new iPhone cost? They don't even give you a price. They just say pay $300 a month for the next 1,300 months, and we okay with it. Yeah. So we can afford what we want to afford. If there's some new J's coming out, for some odd reason, you'll be able to find the money to be able to take care of that for your child or for yourself. But when it comes to making sure we invest in ourselves in terms of our health, then we want to penny pinch. If you're in debt, what are you in debt for? Are you in debt for because you try to have a healthy meal, or because you try to floss and make sure that you had what the Joneses had? So these are, I don't use money as an excuse. There's always, there are exceptions, I'm sure, but it's usually priorities. What are you prioritizing? If you're not prioritizing your health, you're probably prioritizing how you look and ultimately consumerism. And it's that consumerism and that convenience that we need to really push back and then really focus on our health. So if, again, and I have no problem working with folks if they want to come to the farm or buy some things from healthy, no problem. And we can do it at a reduced cost. But as a farmer as well, this is my business. So I'm not trying to reduce the cost of my business. Y'all are not trying to reduce the cost of your ads every year, right? That's not your business model. And likewise, I'm not trying to reduce the cost of my goods because that lowers the value of what I'm doing. and the people that's doing it.
So lastly, because I'd be remiss if I didn't mention this, Max and Reza, is that this end of this week, this Friday, there's this national call for a boycott of those who have pulled back their DEI initiatives. I say that because there's somebody listening that goes to, I'm just going to throw out one of the names, Walmart, for everything, groceries and everything else. All right. So let's say that they participate in the boycott, right? And let's stay within the grocery realm in particular. What would be your advice to those folks if you're not going to go to one of the major chains, and but they may not know where else they can go? What would be your answer?
Well, my answer initially would be, we should always be boycotting. Like, it should never be a day. It should be months on end. Like, I get a little. I'm probably a black nationalist in many ways, especially economically. Pretty much all the clothes I have on, with the exception of my jeans today, are black owned. I'm from a black owned producer, and I'm very intentional about doing that. I've been doing that for the last 20 or 30 years. I look for black vendors to support. Now there's the Virginia Black Farmer Directory. You can find farmers on that particular website to find local farmers. Okay. People want to support me. I'm like, I'm okay. There's a whole lot of other farmers probably closer to you who need your business a lot more than I do. So I want to make sure that my local farmers are around that can be supported, and they have everything that you would need. There's things called community supported agriculture, which when you're doing a boycott or something like that, take time. Don't get caught up in the emotions. Wait till things are in place to be able to take care of you in the process, and just buy less. A lot of times we go to the grocery store and we buy stuff and we put it in the pantry, and stuff is pushed back in the pantry more and more and more and more. And you ain't really buying needs; you're just buying out of habit.
Right.
I ain't bought this in a couple of weeks. We must need some more. And it's not always about being intentional with those dollars. Go into Walmart or whatever place you're getting your stuff with a list. Stick to your list. Don't do anything extra outside of that list. And have some economic discipline in that. And then in the springtime, as farmers are coming up, look to support those farmers. There are cattle share opportunities with people, people we meet who can buy, a quarter of a cow, a half a cow, a whole cow, which provides a whole lot of meat. That's usually grass fed and usually healthier than a lot of meats that you'll find. There's CSAs, community supported agriculture, that will be, I'm sure there's some in Charlottesville, and we'll be doing some things probably in Charlottesville this coming year to kind of help out our community in that way. $50 or $60 box a week will give you vegetables for a week to 10 days that you can have for your family. There are different ways of approaching economic boycotts, but the best one is to be very intentional and do it together, and then make little small things every day. Another aspect of economic boycotts is actually buying shares of the daggone stock and becoming a stakeholder owner of said business, which Walmart shares may be, I don't know, maybe $100, $125 a share. And it wasn't like when I was growing up where you had to get a brokerage account. Now you can do Robinhood, you can do Stash, you can do a whole bunch of other smaller companies and make your voice be heard from a shareholder standpoint. You may be only have a couple of shares. They don't care. You got a voice, you got a vote, and you can help to control or at least initiate some policies internally through that way, especially if you get a lot of other shareholders on your side. So there are different ways to feed that cat or feed that bird.
Gotcha. Thank you, man. We gotta have you back. We gotta stay in touch because that info you're providing something we need to keep disseminating on a regular basis.